Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In the first of his meditations on first philosophy, Rene Descartes has a very interesting discussion about whatever it is that created us human beings. And he begins by talking about God and then considers other possible causes and sets out what the implications of those would be in terms of whether we can, in fact, attain what it is that he's looking for, some sort of body of certain truths, that is, truths that we can be absolutely certain of, not just know through some sort of inductive process of probability, but be absolutely assured that we've got right. And he begins by talking about God. He says, for a long time I've had in my mind a certain opinion that there is a God, capital G God, Dieu, right, who can do everything, and by whom I was created and produced such as I am, as the being that I am, a human being. And for many people, that would be a resolution to the issue, would it not? They would say, oh, well, there's a God, therefore I can trust all these other things. There are many people who make their views about the truth of things rest solely on whether there's a God or not. But that doesn't actually get us out of the problem, according to Descartes, because he goes on and he says, how do I not know that God made things so that there isn't any earth, there isn't any sky or heaven, there's no bodies, there's no extension, étendue. That's a very important term for Descartes. There's no figure or structure of things, no largeness or greatness, grandeur, no place, and that all the same I would have the sentiment or belief that all of these things are the case. How do I know that God isn't actually fooling me like that? And he says, well, I could say God wouldn't do that sort of thing. But how do I know, he says, that in the things that I think I know with the greatest degree of certitude, that he hasn't made me so that I deceive myself every single time that I, for example, add 2 plus 3. How do I know that 2 plus 3 is actually 5 and not something else, and that God has just set me up in such a way that I happen to get a consistent result? You can say, well, why would God do that? He's not worried about why God would do that at this point. How do I know that's not the case? Or he says, when I number the sides of a square, maybe there's actually more than 4 sides. Maybe I get that wrong consistently. Or he says, when I judge something even more easy, right, I couldn't imagine something more than that. And he says, well, we might say that would be repugnant to God's goodness. And then he says, oh, okay, we'll consider that in a while. And he does consider that in, of course, meditation 3 and 4. And then he says, other people would be quite happy to say that there isn't any God. They would rather deny the existence of a God so powerful than to think that everything is so uncertain. And so they actually get God out of the picture so that they can attain more certainty. And he says, let's not fight them right now. In fact, let's actually say that they're right and that God is just a fable. God is just something made up. So what then do they think brought us into being? What would be the origin of our being? And he considers three interesting examples or possibilities here. He says maybe a certain kind of fate, destin, right? Or some sort of necessity, fatalité, right? We've got some causal determinism going on here that has fated from all time, that I would be brought into being as the being who I am, a human being with the certain capacities that I have. Descartes, of course, would have existed back in the 17th century as the human being that he was. Everybody throughout all history is the way that they are. And this is a metaphysical view that some people have held, saying, well, there's no God, but at least there is something like fate or some sort of necessity that produces all of these things down to the particulars, and they couldn't be other than they are. Okay. That's not a problem. There's many people who've held that view throughout history. Or maybe it's chance, right? Maybe it's fortune or a certain kind of randomness, recombining things over and over and over again until you get a certain kind of result that looks like this and then looks at itself reflexively like this. And that's what in French is, hasard, right? Chance, or when we talk about, hazarding a guess, we get that from that word. So now we've got two possibilities. Maybe it's all totally determined, or maybe it's like there's some randomness there, and the randomness stirs things up, and they just sort out the way they happen to do. And then he brings up another possibility, which I think could, interpenetrate with either of these, a continual succession and connection of things. Suite in French and liaison, a connection between things. And here we should think about, causal connections, a causal nexus, things following upon each other. And so Descartes is saying, how did I get the being that I have? How did I get the beliefs that I carry with me wherever I go about, the universe and my body and mathematics and geometry? Where did I get all of that stuff from? Well, either, it came about because I observed my environment and drew some conclusions, and I got into here with the capacities that I have, including my mental capacities, from one of these three types of causes or origins, broadly speaking. Now, here Descartes concludes something quite interesting. He says that to these reasons, here's what I have to say. He says, whether we think they're one way or another, it is certain. Now notice that he says, it's certain that since making mistakes and being deceived are a kind of imperfection, the less powerful the author that they attribute to my origin, the more it would be probable, not just possible, but probable, that I would be so imperfect that I would always deceive myself. I would be fooled continually. So what is he saying there? Well, the more imperfect the cause of my existence and the way I am, the more likely it becomes that I would be fooled more and more often, that I would never actually arrive at the truth of things. So, for example, if it's really just a matter of evolution for human beings to arrive in existence and have the mental capacities that we do, and we're responding to our environment and all that, maybe if that's the case, and it's not some sort of transcendent creator God who created us, maybe it's actually more likely that we're going to get things wrong continually. Get them wrong in ways that have an evolutionary, advantage, but are still wrong. I mean, here Descartes actually sounds like Nietzsche several centuries later, does he not? So what would be the result of this? Whatever I'm going to believe in as the origin of my own being, it could all fool me. It could all create me in such a way that I might get things wrong continually, whether I want to or not. So then the fundamental question is, well, how do I overcome this problem of being fooled? And do I really have any chance to get things right at all?